Earlier this year, I wanted to try and do some kind of challenge run in Pokemon Scarlet. In particular, I decided to try a mix of the popular pacifist and damageless runs. My original goal was to just do this in the Victory Road quest. Originally, I thought the other parts may be a bit too much, but after finishing that challenge, I felt more confident I could at least give the rest of the game a try. The outline of the challenge in full was given in the previous video, which I've linked in the description, but to sum things up, I plan here to complete the Path of Legends, Starfall Street and the Teal Mask. During each of these arcs, anytime I'm in a trainer battle, I have to ensure that both trainers never deal damage to the opposing Pokemon with attacks. Basically, any progress in a battle must be made from self-inflicted damage or damage from abilities and items. With all that in mind, I started things off by making my way over to the Blueberry Academy. I had no intention to complete this arc yet, but I wanted to unlock the terrarium so I had access to the Pokemon unique to that area. In order to do this, I had to have a welcome battle against Lacey. This is a battle where she brings a team clearly intended to ease the player back into double battling. So, in reality, I probably could have put together a team that handled this, but there were a lot of long battles coming up, so I just wanted to get past this as quick as possible. I went for my usual strategy of just bringing 2 Dugtrio that knew Memento, causing me to lose the fight straight away. A loss here doesn't stop my progress, so I unlock the terrarium and then immediately head back to Paldea. Although my previous video was focused on the Victory Road arc, I did make sure to take on the Titan battles throughout. That meant that all that was left in the Path of Legends arc was the fight with Arvin. He has a full team of 6, but none of his Pokemon are Steel or Poison type, so I have something ready to deal with this. As had become the standard for a lot of battles, I opened things up with Glamora. Arvin's Green is a physical attacker, so this should be perfect. My only slight concern is that it has access to Bullet Seed. Since it's a multi-hitting move, there is a chance that it could break my sub and then follow up immediately with some damage. That said, Green also has access to a super effective attack in Psychic Fangs and a double super effective attack in Earthquake, so I was hopeful that I wouldn't even see Bullet Seed. Things went as about expected, and I was able to slowly reduce Glamora's HP down to 1 with substitutes, and eventually use Endure to ensure I could set a layer of Toxic Spikes without taking any damage. Unlike previous battles though, I wasn't happy with having just one set of Toxic Spikes set up. I bring in a second Glamora and go through the same process all over again. This means that any Pokemon that comes in for the rest of the fight will be given bad poison as opposed to the regular version. From full health, this means it should only take 6 turns for a Pokemon to faint to the damage instead of the usual 8 or 9 turns it would normally take. Of course, Green though is already in the battle, so I'll need to take that out a more time consuming way. After 2 Mementos, I don't see it being too much of a threat from most of its attacks. It's just that pesky Bullet Seed that I could see being an issue. Being a grass type move though, I can get around this by bringing in Sourcebook next. It seems kind of fitting that Dealing was the first Pokemon to use in the original video, and Sourcebook is being used in the first proper battle of this video. Its Sap Sipper ability means that the Bullet Seed won't deal any damage at all, and since the other moves have already been used a decent amount, there won't be too much damage left to tank here. I pile onto this by using Sand Attack, making it even more difficult for Greedent to deal any meaningful damage. With this Pokemon clearly under control, it was important for me to start preparing for what was to come. In particular, I want to make sure I can outspeed the following Pokemon, so I start spamming Agility as I wait out the Bullet Seed turns. Eventually, Green does have to resort to Struggle. This is my cue to Baton Pass out and bring in Weezing. I want Weezing to have a few easy turns so that I can set up my defences. Stockpile unfortunately can only be used 3 times, but it does at least mean that both my defences have been somewhat buffed. Garganacl comes in next, and this was the reason why I chose to use Weezing in this fight. Its Purifying Salt ability would normally mean that it was protected from the poison status effect, but Weezing's Neutralizing Gas cancels that out. This does mean I'm going to have to use a Pokemon whose type weakness can be exposed, but I feel like it's a worthwhile trade-off. I do get a free turn to set up though, since Garganacl opens up with Stealth Rocks. After that though, the battle moves towards the more expected Protect and Substitute loop, since Earthquake can have the potential to break substitutes despite the boosts. This is fine though, the stronger poison is going to finish this quickly, and Weezing can keep pretty healthy with its leftovers. Toedscruel is up next, and it also has access to a super effective attack, so I can't get too comfortable just yet. Sadly, I chose to use Protect on the turn Toedscruel used Spore. It would have been nice for me to get the free turn here if I'd gone for a substitute instead. Lucky for me, Arvin decided to double down and use it again, so I got what I wanted in the end. I wanted to make sure that Weezing could use a Protect straight away when the next Pokemon came in, so I focus more on the substitute here, as another spore bounces off me and does nothing. Scovillain's strongest attack here is Fire Blast, but it only has 5 PP. This is why I wanted Protect ready to go. I could stall out 3 of the Fire Blasts, and with its shaky accuracy, there was a chance the other 2 attacks may have just missed. After wasting those power points, Scovillain had to switch to Crunch, which wasn't strong enough to break through my sub. Cloyster was the Pokemon I was most scared of in this fight. Yes, Weezing had shut off its skill link ability, but in a way, this made it a bit scarier. At least before, I knew exactly how much damage I would take from a multi-hit move, but now it would be more random. In order to get around this, I used Protect and Memento with both Weezing and Dugtrio. This wastes 4 turns without any risk of me taking damage, meaning the poison damage is almost finished doing its job. To finish things out though, I brought in Tyranitar. I was hoping the Sandstorm chip damage combined with the 5th turn of toxic damage would have been enough to finish off the Cloyster, but unfortunately I guess the HP value wasn't what I needed. I wasn't actually sure if Tyranitar would outspeed here, but it had been EV'd in speed for the Elite Four, so I guess it was enough. And being a rock type, I guess tempted Cloyster into using Liquidation, which was a much safer option to deal with. Mabostiff comes in last, and it's fairly slow, doesn't have any attacks I really need to worry about, and it now has to deal with toxic damage and sandstorm damage. Yeah, this fight was over. Oh, before I forget though, you may be wondering about the Stealth Rock's Garganackle setup earlier. I gave Dugtrio and Tyranitar heavy duty boots, so they could switch in safely. I knew the battle wouldn't drag on too long at the point I brought them in, so passive healing wasn't too big of a priority. Beating Arven meant I only needed to complete the Starfall Street arc to unlock the Area Zero quest. That said, I decided to head back over to the Kitakami region and continue the story there, since the battles are more standard compared to the Starmobile fights. Because I'd already finished a couple of battles here too, I made my way over to the dreaded den to take on Kieran. Because of when I was going through the DLC, the opponents were still using their low level versions of their teams, so I thought it was only fair that I do the same. In fact, for this fight, I decided to take it one step further. If I was going to use low level Pokemon, why not go as low as possible? So I decided to rock up to this fight with a team of level 1 Pokemon. Kieran opens things up with his Poliwag, and taking a look at its moveset, we can see he's given it some decent coverage options. That said, his only option if he wants to damage Drifloon is to use Water Gun. Expecting that attack to be used, I switched Drifloon out for Cacnea. This Cacnea has access to its hidden ability Water Absorb. Not only does this prevent it from taking any damage from water attacks, for this fight in particular, it crucially will restore some HP when it's not already full. As you can see at the end of the turn, Cacnea takes damage from its Black Sludge held item. It can't stick around to heal itself, so I'll leave it to Poliwag to keep it topped up. I spend a lot of turns switching back and forth between these two Pokemon as they cover each other from taking any damage at all. Since Water Gun is the only attack that makes sense to use against Drifloon, its power points get used up first, so Cacnea was able to take a little break. Spiritomb takes over and the switching cycle begins again. Spiritomb may not have the flying type to avoid ground type attacks, but I gave it an air balloon to hold, so that acts as a decent alternative. It was worth making this little adjustment since its pressure ability forces Poliwag's PP to be used up faster than normal. I wanted to reduce the PP of Poliwag's attacks to 0 in a particular order. I'd already dealt with Water Gun, and I wanted to get rid of Haze next. Thankfully, since the other 2 attacks it had left were attacks that wouldn't affect my Pokemon, Poliwag would focus on using Haze basically every turn. The reason I needed Haze gone was because Haze's effect removes all stat changes my Pokemon had. I had plans for Drifloon to do just this, so it was best to get that phase of the fight out of the way first. As soon as I see Pound being used, I know Kieran is out of other options, so I set up a substitute as is standard and maximise my evasion with 3 minimizers. I still have a while until Poliwag will have to resort to struggle, so to speed up that process, I use Spite to drain power points faster. Of course, once Poliwag does begin to struggle, then my subs break immediately, so I need to carefully track Poliwag's PP usage so I'm ready to use Substitute as soon as the struggles come in. Yanma comes in next, and due to Drifloon's typing, I guess Air Cutter is the most appealing attack? An attack that already isn't 100% accurate, mixed with my evasion boosts, meaning I can bat and pass out a Cacnea with a decent chance of safety. Under the cover of the Substitute, Cacnea can finally get rid of its Black Sludge, and once again, Yanma misses another Air Cutter. I was pretty sure I had the second Pokemon under control now. I could use a combination of Protect and Substitute from here, waiting for the Black Sludge to finish the job. The final Pokemon to come in was Furret. Once again, looking at its moveset, I can totally see why Dig would be a decent coverage option to deal good damage to rock and steel types, but the ground and normal combination can do nothing to my two ghost type Pokemon. No need to bore you with the massive stall fest here. I kept track of PP usage as Drifloon and Spiritomb spent their turns wasting Furret's PP with no threat of damage, until finally Furret is forced to struggle. Since Drifloon baton passed over a substitute, Spirit had just enough help to keep replacing them until Furret knocked itself out. My first proper fight with Carmine was next, and although I'm not using a level 1 team anymore, I'm still not too worried about her team. She opens up with a Morpeko, not a massively threatening Pokemon, but fast enough at these low levels that I need a bit of setup. After an opening Memento from Diglett, I start things off with Jolteon. Not a Pokemon exactly known for its tankiness, but it outspeeds Morpeko, so it'll do as a starting point. Jolteon's Volt Absorb ability means that I don't need to worry about the electric type moves, so that just leaves the dark types. To help with that, a Terra Fighting, which along with the previous debuff, mean I can set up a sub without instantly losing it. My goal with Jolteon is to pass special defense and speed buffs to my other Pokemon using Carmines and Agility. This allows me to bring in Glimmet, confident that it will be able to outspeed. On top of that, the special defense boosts would hopefully mean that Morpeko is less tempted to use Thundershock, since its damage would be massively reduced. Not a major problem, but I realise I left Harden on Glimmet. The reason this is a little annoying is because I wanted to move to spam if Morpeko didn't break my sub. If that move is Harden, then it would mean it would take even longer to break future subs. Turns out though the substitute breaks almost immediately, so it doesn't really matter. Eventually, I get the layer of Toxic Spikes set up and follow this with a Memento from Glimmet, and a second Diglett that I bring in afterwards. With Morpeko completely nerfed, I bring Jolteon back in a second time and begin boosting its stats once again. After getting my special defense and speed to where I want them once again, I baton pass out and this time give the boost to Skarmory. Its already massive defense means that it should be tank enough on both sides to handle anything Carmine throws at me well enough. In my previous video, what I would have done now is just stalled out the Pokemon that was currently out and let it knock itself out with struggle. With Skarmory though, I can make this process less painfully slow. Using Roar, Morpeko is forced out and Swadloon is forced in, getting poisoned immediately. Later on when Morpeko rejoins the battle, it too will have to land on the Toxic Spikes. This means that instead of the dozens of turns I would have needed to waste for all of its power points, I now only need 8 or 9. Not only is this good in terms of time saving, but it also means I don't need to be as restrictive when it comes to my own Pokemon's power points. Previously, I've needed to find otherwise useless moves and teach them to my Pokemon just because they provided me something to use to waste turns. Swadloon is a bug and grass type Pokemon, two types that should be easy for my steel and flying type to handle. That said, it does know the move Trailblaze, and this move did give me a bit of trouble when I was taking on the gym leaders. I don't want to let the speed boost get out of control, so I roar again, making sure that the stat boost is reset. Other than that small risk, there really wasn't too much to say about the rest of the fight. When Poltergeist comes out, it does use Mega Drain occasionally. The health restoration from it though isn't enough to offset the poison, so it only meant a few more turns until it fainted. This meant it was only a matter of time now until all Pokemon fainted and I defeated Carmine. Moving back to Kieran, I'm done using a level 1 team. I'll have to start taking things a little more seriously. Starting things off, I want to nerf Yanma, so I open with a Memento. Yanma's moveset consists of 2 normal type moves and a wind type move. Bramblegast is immune to these 3 attacks, and by using Terra Ghost, I can now shrug off Struggle Bug behind a substitute quite nicely. To speed up the process as well, Spite helps deplete the PP pretty quick. It would have been simple enough to stall out the remaining attacks with just Bramblegast, but to save my own power points, I decided to cycle back and forth with Spiritomb once I knew the air cut was out of the way. This had the added bonus of speeding things up even further, since Spiritomb comes with a pressure ability. Jumping ahead to the end of the switching stall fest, I bring Bramblegast back in with enough time to set up a substitute and a few defense curls before Yanma starts to struggle. I must have miscounted how much PP had been used, since I end up wasting a few defense curls, but that didn't really matter in the long run. There's more normal type fun as Furret comes in next. Obviously my ghost types can deal with normal type attacks, so let's see what it has in terms of coverage. Only Dig once again. That's easy enough to cover. Drifloon's dual ghost and flying typing gives it full immunity, and my Spiritomb is holding the air balloon, so it'll also take no damage from ground type moves, as long as I make sure there's no rogue attack to break the balloon. Once again, I spent some time switching back and forth between my ghost type Pokemon, until I think I'm close enough to Throat running out of options. At this point, I bring Drifloon in and start spamming Minimise. I worry that the struggles may be enough to wear down my Drifloon, so I throw some Protects in during the last few turns to give myself enough time to accumulate some meaningful leftovers recovery. Poliwhirl's next, and much like my solution last time to this evolution line, I bring in Cacnea. Thanks to the evasion boosts, it's easy enough to pull off a switcheroo whilst remaining subbed, so I pass a Black Sludge over and simply Protect stall until it's taken care of. It seemed unlikely there was ever even a risk with just those things in mind, but the water absorbability would prevent any damage from Water Pulse. My grass typing would help resist the mud shots, and although I didn't resist takedown, the recall was only ever going to speed up the process. Now for the newest addition to Kieran's team. Diplin's the last Pokemon to come in. Its moveset reminds me of Elite Four Hassle's Flapple, so I already have a strategy I can reuse here. I open things up with Azumarill, and thankfully Diplin starts things off with Syrup Bomb. The reason I'm happy to see this early is because Kieran's AI now knows that Azumarill is immune to grass type moves due to Sap Sipper. This means that on a turn I swap out Azumarill, I shouldn't expect to see Syrup Bomb queued up. Knowing that grass and Drang type moves won't affect my Azumarill, Kieran has no choice but to use a normal type move. This means I can bring Spiritomb back in risk free, and for the third time this fight, use as part of a more efficient switch stalling pair. Eventually, Diplin runs out of double hit power points, and with Defense Curl already maxing out its defense, I imagine Kieran will now probably focus on his other attacking moves. This means the rest of the fight is all down to Azumarill. I say that as if it's some big undertaking. After using 3 charms, I just spam Splash for a bunch of turns, until eventually Diplin has to hit Azumarill with some very weak struggles. Also, while it isn't important to this challenge, I was watching J Rose's Caterpie only run while I was writing this part of the script. I'd completely forgotten that Struggle used to deal recall damage equal to a quarter of the damage done, as opposed to a flat quarter of the Pokemon's health. I can't even imagine how much of a pain this challenge would have been if the old system was still in place. That's enough hypothetical for now though, it's time to switch things up a bit. Initially, I hadn't planned on bothering with the Team Star story arc, but it seemed silly not to finish one of the main stories if I was going to do the DLC. Much like Victory Road though, I won't be doing these in order. The Fire base seemed like it would be the most simple, so I started off there. I really didn't want to spend too much time on the grunts outside of each base. Fortunately, this one only had one Pokemon, meaning I didn't exactly need anything groundbreaking as far as team building goes. I open up with 3 Diglett Mementos and bring in Ghastly. This particular Ghastly's default Terror type was Poison, so I Terror to that to remove my Dark weakness and bring up a sub. Even with Ghastly's middling defences, the lowered attack and now neutral damage from Bite isn't enough to break through. This means it's simple enough to trick over the Black Sludge I'm holding. Unfortunately, without a held item, Ghastly hasn't got any HP recovery available, and even though Houndour needs 2 turns to break the substitute, I'll still run out of HP before it does. My only plan is to spam Hypnosis, hoping I can keep Houndour asleep long enough. It's close, but with 1 turn left I just scrape by. Probably could have been more methodical with this fight, but I just wanted to focus on the more important fight coming up. Before that though, there's the minigame where I have to fight through the base. I don't know how others feel about this, but I'm happy not counting these as trainer battles. At least not ones where the rules of this challenge should apply. I guess I could argue that since Pokemon I'm using only have status moves, then they must still be obeying the no damage dealt condition, but I don't really want to get into that. Speaking of non-conventional trainer fights though, it's time for the Fire Squad leader. Torkoal has only access to 2 attacks, Flame Wheel and Clear Smog. I can easily stall out these 2 moves by switching between Magnemite to shrug off Clear Smog and Vulpix, whose Flash Fire ability means Flame Wheel will deal no damage. This will take a while, so let's just jump ahead. Flame Wheel has more power points than Clear Smog, so eventually Vulpix is left in, waiting behind a substitute until Torkoal starts to use Struggle. Unlike Ghastly from before, Vulpix can actually hold leftovers, so it's easy enough to recover off the damage the substitutes cause. With her only regular Pokemon out of the way, Mela brings in Starmobile and I bring in Litwick. I start things off immediately with a trick, handing over a Black Sludge. Starmobiles are immune to most types of non-direct damage it seems, so I'm extremely pleased that there's something I can do to hurt it. You probably noticed though that I didn't set up any kind of substitute or other protection beforehand. Turns out this Starmobile has pretty poor coverage, only fire and normal type attacks, I can do basically whatever I want. The other Team Star bases won't be as free of a win as this one, but it felt good to make a start on this story arc. It was time for another rematch with Kieran, and with his team starting to fill out, team building for these fights was getting a little trickier. His Yanma had remained mostly the same. Annoyingly though, the key change was it now had access to Bug Buzz. This meant I couldn't just have Brambleghast tank the bug attacks, the sound probably would get around that. This was fine though. Thanks to my battle with Grusher in the last video, I knew how to deal with this situation. Since Kieran opened up with Air Cutter, I knew now he would only use Bug Buzz if possible when seeing Brambleghast. This meant I could switch between it and Voltorb, who had the soundproof ability, every turn until Bug Buzz power points had ran out. Once the coast was clear, Brambleghast would speed things up again with Spite. Before that, I made sure to use Defense Curl 6 times, so it should have been easy to shrug off the struggles, but of course the first one immediately crits. After that though, it was smooth sailing. Gligar comes in next, and once again I'm recycling a strategy from last time. Using Minun would surely bait in a ground type move. By terrestrializing into flying type and switching over a Choice Scarf, any flying type Pokemon are now completely safe, and it would take much less time wasting Gligar's PP. I have a plan for the remaining Pokemon I want to set in motion now, but because Gligar is pretty fast thanks to the Choice Scarf, I need some setup. Drifloon can safely come in and put up a substitute, and Baton pass it out immediately to bring in Glimmet. Because I know Gligar has no choice but to use physical attacks now, I can bring my own Glimmet's HP down to 1, all the while knowing that once it gets there, I can definitely endure, tank the Bulldoze, and set up Toxic Spikes for the remaining Pokemon. I still have some more work to do before Gligar goes down though, so I switch back again to Drifloon and work on evasion boosting, followed by some stockpiles for the dual defense boosts. With the stage now set, I Baton pass again, this time to Meowstic. Probably not a Pokemon you would associate with tanking attacks well. That was Drifloon's job. What it does provide me with though is a prankster Pokemon with access to Gravity. Kieran at this point still has 3 Pokemon waiting to come in. 2 of these are grounded and not immune to poison, so Toxic Spikes will immediately put them on a timer. His third Pokemon, Cramorant, however, is a flying type, so it won't touch the Toxic Spikes. With Gravity in play though, I have 5 turns where flying and levitating Pokemon will be forced to the ground when they come in, and luckily for me, Cramorant is Kieran's next choice. With it now poisoned, no ways for the Toxic Spikes to be cleared, or ways to remove the status condition, the last 3 Pokemon are now on a pretty short timer. Cramorant is able to land a few decent hits and even breaks my sub, but in reality I've overloaded Meowstic with buffs. Any damage I take will eventually be healed off, and Cramorant eventually goes down. Things are even worse for Poliwhirl. Its best attack is Liquidation. This is a physical attack, so I can weaken it even further by using Reflect. Once again, there's nothing can be done before it faints too. Finally, Dipplin may have had the worst showing of all. It starts off by trying to hit me with a Dragon Breath. The evasion boosts though pay off here as the attack simply missed. Kieran then decided to spend the next few turns using Defense Curl over and over again. I guess technically this is more useful than missing an attack, but poison damage has clearly not instilled a sense of urgency in the AI. Anyway, there was one final Dragon Breath attempt, but at that point it didn't matter what happened. That was Dipplin's last turn. While I'd been working on this fight, I was thinking about the Team Star bases. The Black Sludge method should be okay for 4 out of 5 of them, but the Poison base in particular wouldn't take damage from that item. I wanted to get that sorted out as soon as possible, so I made my way back to the Paldea region. The Grunt this time uses 2 Pokemon, but this fight actually might be easier than the one in the previous base. There's no urgency when it comes to Gulpin, since its moveset is made up of the Stockpiled Trio and Toxic. Nothing for Haunter to worry about, so it doesn't really need any help. It is nice anytime I can keep my team fairly lightweight. Not only do these battles take a long time each, but also, since a lot of the moves used are the same across many Pokemon, it's a pain to keep getting the resources to create the same TMs. Gulpin was really simple to deal with, but Shroodle wasn't much harder. This time, it does have a couple of attacks that can actually deal damage to me. I could have brought a Steel type with me to tank Poison Jab, but that would involve more switching strategies, which is even slower than just watching the attacks. Plus, it still wouldn't have helped with U-turn. I can make this fight a little less tedious thanks to Haunter's move pool also including Poison Jab. It takes a couple of turns, but once I have a substitute up, the double resisted attacks can't break it easily without a lucky crit, so I have the chance to use Imprison. Not only does this make Haunter now essentially immune to everything but U-turn, it also means there's one less attack I need to spend time stalling out. U-turn is also double resisted, and this time not even stab, so I don't have to worry about Haunter surviving. Now it was time to deal with the leader Atticus. As already mentioned, I needed a different plan than Black Sludge. To understand what that'll be though, let's see what I do in the lead up to the Starmobile. I start things off with Berserker. I got this Pokemon by completing the side story with Salvatore from the school, which concludes with a gifted Galarian Meowth. That may seem like an odd detour to take, but it seemed to me like this Pokemon was the best one for the job here. The opponent's Skuntank has access to 3 moves: Sucker Punch, Toxic, and Venoshock. I always love coming across Sucker Punch in this challenge because it seems like a good move for coverage, but is useless against the movesets I'm restricted to. The other 2 moves are Poison type, so I already have immunity to them. Berserker has access to both Amnesia and Iron Defense, so it doesn't take long to max out both its defenses. I could have easily just stalled out Skuntank like this, but there was more I wanted to do with the other Pokemon, and both defenses maxed out. I was pretty confident I could baton pass and still be safe. I first swapped to Masquerain. Intimidate lowered Skuntank's attack, some extra guarantee against the struggles coming up, but more importantly it also uses agility. This ensures that I should always be outspeeding any of the regular Pokemon used here. After this, I baton pass over to Drifblim, who gets to work setting up 3 minimizers. Normally I'd consider this as a positive thing, now a lot of attacks will simply miss my Pokemon. This will certainly be helpful in the short term, but it will come back to bite me soon. More on that when it comes about. For now, I bring Berserker back in to finish stalling the Skuntank. Reveroom, the little one, was up next, and it has decent coverage, so I just had to accept some attacks may deal some damage. That was fine though. I'd already finished the majority of my setup, so I could just get to work using Spite to try and finish this part as quickly as possible. It doesn't take too long to force Assurance to run out of power points, so that meant there was no longer any super effective attack to worry about. 10 uses of Spite won't be enough here to get rid of all of Reveroom's power points, but once Bulldoze is the only move left, I pass over to Masquerain once again. I have a few turns to waste, so now it seems like the best possible time to continue using Agility. The last regular Pokemon is Muck, and it only comes with 2 moves, Sludge Wave and Mud Slap. With my team composition, I could easily just switch around to take no damage, but at this point I'm more than tanky enough, so I just leave it up to Sinistea to spite away all the power points. With these super buffs in place, I was ready to take on the Starmobile. My substitute against Muck held, and I still had decent HP, so Sinistea had a free turn at the beginning of the fight to use Trick. Instead of handing over a Black Sludge this time though, I pass over a Life Orb. The Starmobile immediately responds with a Flame Charge. Thanks to my increased evasion, I am able to dodge the attack, which is extremely important. I can't really afford to lose my speed advantage. Panic over now though. I can baton pass over to my Flareon or Vulpix. Both are Flash Fire, so Flame Charge should not be an issue. To my shock and frustration though, I notice Flareon does take damage from Flame Charge. I gave it the wrong ability. That was an annoying realization to have. I was tempted to reset, but I was in pretty deep and decided to see if this was salvageable. On the plus side, I could see that the Life Orb was doing its job, chipping away at the Starmobile's health each time it attacked. I at least had Vulpix who could prevent any more Flame Charges from landing, and it didn't seem like the single boost so far was enough to take over me in terms of speed. I wasn't really sure what the best plan was from here, but I was hoping Vulpix could handle it. Life Orb was raising the damage done by the Starmobile, so I was concerned that I may run out of substitutes. In retrospect, I probably should have evolved into Ninetales for a bit more bulk. My solution to this problem was to baton pass out to Masquerain. Doing so would trigger its Intimidate ability, reducing the Starmobile's damage output. I follow this up by immediately swapping back to Vulpix, since the super effective Flame Charge would be the best option to follow up with. Repeating this multiple times reduced the Starmobile's attack down to a manageable number. This still didn't take care of all of my issues. You've probably noticed every fight I speed up the footage. There's only so much you can talk about when it comes to sitting there waiting for your opponent to run out of PP. The footage for this battle in particular though has even more extreme speed up. The reason for this is the mistake I brought up earlier. By maximising my evasion, a lot of attacks just aren't hitting me, and unlike the Black Sludge, I need successful attacks for the recoil damage to kick in. The one saving grace here is that Baton Pass has a ton of power points, so by spending my turns using that as much as possible, I'm at least not wasting other attacks that may be more useful later on. One thing that does work in my favour is that Spin Out is also part of the Starmobile's moveset. It doesn't seem to want to use it much, but when it does, it harshly lowers its own speed. This takes the pressure off Vulpix a bit, since a rogue Flame Charge landing on another Pokemon wouldn't put me on the back foot in terms of speed. It takes a lot of turns, so much I was genuinely concerned I was going to run out of options for Vulpix, but Starmobile eventually lands its last attack, causing it to finally go down. That was such a pain, but I'm pretty sure the other bases shouldn't be as bad, even if they are higher levels with bigger teams. Moving from one tricky fight to another, the final Kieran fight in the Teal mask was probably one of the most intricate standard battles I'd come across. Yes, his team hasn't changed massively, so I had a rough outline of what would be useful, but this version of team has priority, sound-based attacks, multi-hit attacks, flying types to avoid spikes, steel types to resist them along with weather. A lot of my usual strategies wouldn't be a catch-all solution, so I needed some kind of amalgamation. I started things off with Glamora to get the toxic spikes up early. Shiftry does have access to Fake Out in its moveset, so I had to make sure to use Protect turn 1 just to be sure I didn't take some chip damage immediately. After that though, it only had access to physical attacks, so I could conduct my Endure strategy as usual. The toxic spikes wouldn't be useful at this point in the fight since by default half the team is immune, but none of those Pokemon were poison types, so there wasn't much to lose by setting them up to deal with the other half. Using Memento after this allowed me to get Zeb Striker in safely, and also compensate for its fairly poor bulk. The extra turns gifted to me allowed me to boost my special defense a few stages before using Raw to force Shiftry out. The beauty of this would be it would have to switch back in later, forcing it to land on the toxic spikes. Diplin was the Pokemon forced in, and was one of the ones I was able to poison. I wasn't expecting to see it use double hit, so I was essentially dealing with a pure special attacker. My charge boosts immediately pay off as I'm now able to tank attacks much better, even without Glamora's help. Even though I had a Pokemon with a substitute up and baton pass at the ready as Diplin went down, I decided to hard switch to Klefki as Gliscor came in. My two Pokemon share a ground weakness, so I would have just lost the sub straight away as I switched in, so doing it this way brought me back one turn. A Bulldoze from Gliscor would obviously deal a lot of damage to Klefki, so I had to open things up with Magnet Rise. Immune to my biggest threat, Gliscor had poor options left. Poison Tail and Harden I was totally fine with seeing, and even Aerial Ace wasn't too worrying against my defense invested Steel type. I was on a bit of a timer though. I'd spent the first couple of turns making sure I was safe from Gliscor's attacks, but all the while I was being worn down by Black Sludge. By the time I was able to switcheroo the item over, I was practically at half HP. I just had to hope I didn't see too many critical hits. In the end though, not only were there no critical hits, Gliscor spent half its time using Harden, so there really wasn't much to worry about. Poliwrath was up next, and it had occurred to me that I didn't really have a great check in mind. The problem was the order the Pokemon came in weren't predictable like other battles. I had Dugtrio ready to Memento something that I needed to, and this seemed like as good a time as any. I decided of my remaining Pokemon, Klefki is probably the best choice to bring back in. I shouldn't need it for any more of the Pokemon, and its moveset has Protect, so stalling would be easier. I thought this would be a bit dicey, but it isn't long before Poliwrath uses Belly Drum, taking away half of its HP. This would have been concerning if this was going to be a long drawn out battle of attrition, but it was now the complete opposite. I only had to stall a couple of turns before it fainted. Almost a shame I used the Memento here, but oh well. 3 to go and Probopass is in next, so I bring in Hakamoto. Its Dragon Fighting typing will resist the Electric and Rock-filled moveset Probopass has going for it. What's more is that I have access to Noble Roll, a move that lowers both physical and special attack of my opponent. Handy here since Probopass has mixed coverage. While all of this is nice, that's about all I can do in this fight. No ways to speed up the stall here. I just need to tank the attacks as best as possible and hope that the substitutes I have available are enough to waste all of Probopass's power points. Looking at that moveset in more detail though, there isn't anything I can do to make this take less turns, but arguably the scariest attack in that list, Rock Blast, is a non-issue here. One of Hakamoto's abilities is Bulletproof, which provides complete immunity to bomb-type moves. Honestly, before this challenge I had no idea there were so many subcategories of attacks like this in the game. I stall out until there's nothing but Rock Blast left, without too much issue, deal with the struggles, and switch out for Electrode. It has to deal with Yanmega, and this is the moveset that could have caused me some grief. A priority move in Quick Attack and a sound-based move in Bug Buzz could have resulted in some tricky switch game shenanigans, but thankfully I'd still not used my Terra yet. It doesn't matter that Electrode is extremely fast. If I didn't Terra Ghost and Yanmega used Quick Attack on its first turn, then there would be nothing I could have done to stop the damage. I mean, of course there's Protect, but that's just kicking the can down the road. I get the best case scenario here though, and it goes for Bug Buzz. Electrode's Soundproof ability means I can get my sub up for free. I guess 2 of its moves aren't Stab and the third one was Flying, and Kieran couldn't have known I was going to Terra out of my Electric type that turn. In order to capitalise on that turn, I set Light Screen up immediately, since the only 2 attacks left that can deal damage to me are special, and Electrode has passable special defense. One of those two attacks is Ancient Power, which has a 10% chance to raise all of Yanmega's stats. With only 5 chances to use it, statistically it was unlikely I'd have to deal with more than one boost. That would probably be okay in terms of speed, since Electrode is super fast, but I didn't want to see a special attack growing. I was able to preempt this issue though by using Eerie Impulse to push the special attack stat down much further. All 5 Ancient Powers failed to give the Omni boost, so with its special attack lowered as much as possible, there's nothing Yanmega can do, and eventually it has to resort to Quick Attack and Bug Buzz. Last, and maybe least, is the Shift Tree this battle started with. I had forgotten about the potential Fake Out, but for whatever reason, Shift Tree opens with Aerial Ace. Surely that was the worst option, but you know what, this has been another long battle, so I'm glad to be reaching the end of it. At one point Shift Tree tried to use Bullet Seed, another multi-hit move that could have been a threat, but Zeb Striker has its hidden ability Sap Sipper, saving me again from an ill-timed substitution fade. The rest of the fight, it's just resisting Aerial Aces. I could have sworn Shift Tree hadn't used all of its paybacks at the start of the fight, but it looks like I must have counted wrong. Wouldn't have made a huge difference though if it had 1 or 2 left. And that's the last of Kieran, for this video at least. I wonder how much more grief he could cause me in the future. Before wrapping up the Teal Mask once and for all, I made my way back to the first team starbase. Once again, the Grunt only has 1 Pokemon, so I'm not too interested in investing a lot into this fight. My Diglett army nerfs Murkrow into the ground with Mementos, and then I decide to bring in the Monferno I'd gotten from the egg gifted to me in Kitakami. I Terra Fire immediately just to get rid of that pesky flying weakness, and proceed to switcheroo Black Sludge over once the substitute was up. I thought I had the fight basically wrapped up at this point, but Murkrow caught me off guard a little by using Haze. This meant its negative stat changes were undone, and now Monferno wasn't doing a great job at tanking the attacks. It's a close one, but I'm just able to stall out long enough by going for a risky double protect at the end of the fight. That may have come across as a bit lucky, which I guess is true, but this is such a short fight I could have easily reset a few times until the luck was in my favour. On to the main event, and although I was only staring down a team of 2, both Pokemon had access to Snarl, meaning I wasn't just going to be able to hide behind a substitute and wait. I start things off with Whimsicott, whose fairy typing should deter any Snarl usage. That said, Pawniard also has access to Steel type moves, and I don't want to take too much damage, so I immediately Terra Dark, which is enough to keep me safe, while also maintaining a Dark type resistance. My main reason for bringing in Whimsicott though, was to deal with Pawniard's annoying Defiant ability. If I tried to use Memento like in other fights, Defiant would essentially cancel out the effect. This is where Worry Seed comes into play. I don't care if I can't put Pawniard to sleep, so swapping its ability for Insomnia makes things much simpler. Oh, and as a side note, I was careful here to make sure Whimsicott did not have the Prankster ability, since my moves would have failed against Dark types. That's fine though, I don't need priority here when I simply have a higher speed. With Pawniard in a more vulnerable position, I was able to finally use Memento without worrying, and even more so, I could stack other debuffs like Sand Attack from Umbreon. Umbreon is pretty naturally tanky, but I had to be wary that Pawniard may get an attack boost if Metal Claw hit and triggered its secondary effect. That didn't seem to be coming up too much though, so I continued setting up with Umbreon for as long as possible. I pass over to Furret next. Its main job is to increase speed with agility in preparation for the Starmobile. Once it's done that, I keep it in for one more turn to trick my leftovers onto Pawniard. It's at full HP already, so it won't be of any benefit to it. Next up, Shroodle is brought in. I should say that earlier I had Umbreon use a Calm Mind to try and make Snarl a less appealing option. It's the only attack in Pawniard's attack set that will get weaker as my special defense goes up. Shroodle's only job is to use Trick as well, giving Pawniard a Black Sludge in exchange for the leftovers it's just received. The Baton Pass chain then continues as Clefable comes in next. I begin using Cosmic Power to start boosting both defenses, but I'm careful to only use the move 5 times instead of the usual 6. I don't want to max out my defense just yet, since that might make Snarl a little more tempting. 5 boosts should be plenty for now though anyway. It isn't long after that setup that the Starmobile jumps in and Clefable's ready. Thanks to its Magic Guard ability, it's been able to sit on the field while holding a Black Sludge that it can immediately trick over. I was surprised to see the Starmobile open up with Swift, since I'd specifically set up to try and put my opponent off using special attacks, but Swift was fine, I just didn't want to see Snarl. That was the only turn it would get a chance to use it, as I Baton Pass out next to Jangmo-o. This time, I opted for Soundproof, so the threat of Snarl was now gone. Also, can we just appreciate the Jangmo-o evolution line's abilities? Its third one is Overcoat, so it can really provide valuable protection in a lot of different scenarios. As for this battle though, thanks to all the setup I'd done previously, the Starmobile is less of a hassle to deal with than the previous Pawnyard. No evasion boost this time, but the defense boosts make it an easy job waiting out the Black Sludge. I still think the Poison type Starbase was the most awkward to deal with, but I would now need to start preparing myself for base leaders who had fuller teams. Before that though, one last outing on my field trip to Kitakami. Unlike Kieran, my last battle with Carmine was much more manageable, partly due to not having a full team, but mostly due to having a complete poison weakness. You know what that means. Mighty Yenna's moveset looks like it should be simple enough to bait out the physical attacks needed to set up toxic spikes. The only concern here is Howl. Although it isn't a damage dealing move, if used enough, it'll be tricky to deal with later on. My solution to this was to Terra Psychic in the hopes of drawing out the move Crunch. This seems to work well enough, as the only Howl came about before Carmine knew I was changing to Psychic type. That one boost is cancelled out though, as I Memento after having set the toxic spikes. I doubled down on the attack nerfs by following up with a Dugtrio Memento. Masquerain enters after, and its Intimidate ability helps it deal with a super effective Fire Fang. This gives me an opportunity to set up some speed boosts with agility. Now, being faster than any of the opposing Pokemon, I baton pass over to Clefable. Since speed is sorted, it's Clefable's job to work on defense. A Cosmic Power fueled few turns later, and it's up to Drifloon to round out this setup phase. A Ghost type going up against a Pokemon with a Stab Dark type attack isn't ideal, but since Mighty Yenna is focused on boosting its attack with Howl, I have time to set up enough evasion boost to dodge any problematic attack that follows. With every stat I wanted maxed out, I circle back to Masquerain. To save some time on PP stalling, I go with Whirlwind to force Mighty Yenna out. This drags Morpeko in, poisoning it immediately. Obviously it's good news that I've poisoned the current Pokemon, but forcing Mighty Yenna out both got rid of its stat boosts and means that it'll have to re-enter the fight and deal with the toxic spikes later, so I won't have to wait a ton of turns for it to struggle. Morpeko isn't too threatening, but it does have access to the move Uproar, another sound type move that will get around my substitute. The evasion boosts will help here, but I'd like more assurance that I won't get screwed by that attack. In an attempt to stop Morpeko from using Uproar, I bring in Ogerpon. In particular, I chose the Cornerstone Mask version. Being part Rock type, I hope that would mean a normal type attack would be less of an appealing option. I think in reality, I could have chosen a better normal resist, and it turns out you can get out bringing Ogerpon to this fight completely if you remove it from your game, but it seemed more story appropriate to try and win with it. Without the main concerning attack, the fight is pretty easy to stall out, and next up was Leavanny. It does have a decently powerful super effective attack in X-Scissor, but sadly for it, the majority of them miss, and by the time it does land one, I've already significantly reduced its attack with Charm. Sinistcha is another Pokemon that I'm not really worried about. This one doesn't even have access to a super effective attack. My only concern here is that Machagotcha does have the ability to heal the user. If enough of them landed, the poison damage could be offset long enough for me to burn through the power points of some of my moves. Thanks to using Takedown a few times already, Mighty Yenna comes back in with some health already gone. Unlike the last time I saw it, I actually welcome the Howl, since at this point, it's just using up one of the few turns it'll have before the poison takes care of it. Finally, Ninetales comes in. It hasn't got any problematic attacks, and my only potential worry was going to be how much health I had left at this point. Since I needed the Cornerstone Mask on to get the Rock type, I didn't have access to any passive healing. Fortunately, I barely needed to use Substitute at all against the previous 4 Pokemon, so it almost didn't matter what I had here. I was pretty much guaranteed to survive. And that concluded the Teal Mask. A few of the fights in this arc did involve coming up with some weird strategies, but they were all technically regular 1v1 battles. Most of what I had left to do in the game now were gimmicky in some way or another, so I'd need to alter my mindset a little moving forward. It was time to work on concluding the Starfall Street story now, and the Fairy base was up next. The Grunt fight outside was frustrating because I didn't bother to check what Pokemon he'd be using before taking him on, and what I'd put together originally was based around Prankster. Because I was focused on the Fairy typing, I hadn't thought about a Pokemon like Mogram, whose part Dark typing shut down Prankster. Instead, I decided to bring Cyclizar back. I'd hoped its Dragon typing would bait out a Fairy type attack, meaning I could Shed Tail over to Berserker safely. I get lucky with the Play Rough, and I'm able to start setting up Amnesia boosts, with Iron Defense thrown there for good measure. Now, Morgrim does have access to Nasty Plot. This could have caused me issues if it had focused on setting up first, then punching hard through my subs, but it seemed to just attack unboosted. I baton pass over to Furret so I can start dealing damage with a tricked Black Sludge. Furret isn't an ideal choice for this role, since even with its defense boost, it's still a little frail, especially when its held item was dealing damage as opposed to healing it. I get one agility in and pass over to Armor Rouge. Its fire psychic typing may appear like a double-edged sword in this particular battle. The fire type resists fairy attacks, but the psychic type makes it weak against dark. But with my special defense maxed out, I'm okay with taking some hits from Dark Pulse. Hatchram is the other Pokemon, and I plan to use the same opener as before, and have Cyclizar bait in a fairy type attack, this time switching to Klefki. I'm able to get to work much quicker this time, immediately using Switcheroo to hand over my second Black Sludge. Again, without any passive recovery, I'm concerned about how long Klefki can hold out against Hatchram, but I think the decider was the second Calm Mind it used. I'm not sure what the calculations are, so it's hard to say if that second Calm Mind was actually needed to break my substitute in one shot. If it wasn't needed, then I got quite lucky, as Hatchram goes down on the last turn I could guarantee safety from damage. After that, I would have had to resort to double protect gambles. Into the base, and I'm up against an Azumarill first. Just like the outside of the base, I plan to bait in a Play Rough and Shed Tail to a resist. Klefki is able to take the attack well, and passes over the Black Sludge. Similar to the Grun fight, this could be close, but looking at Azumarill's moveset, all damaging moves have less than 100% accuracy. This meant there was a chance I would just get a free turn anyway, but it turns out, when I don't have a sub up, Azumarill likes to try and load my stats with Charm. This makes it much safer for Klefki to hang on as Black Sludge does its job. Wigglytuff is in next, and this is the reason why I brought Armor Rouge with me. Two of Wigglytuff's attacks are Fairy and Steel type, so they aren't great options against my Fire type. Because of that, I'm expecting to see Body Slam and Terra Armor Rouge to Ghost type to trick over a Choice Scarf. Wigglytuff actually decided to go for Charm, but that's fine. Locked into Charm, I can safely switch over to Drifloon. You know what that means though, time for Minimize boosts. Since I don't have to worry about damage to any of my Pokemon, I can pass the boosts over to Berserker and build my defences. And you know what, why not keep it going and have Furrow take care of the speed stat. Funnily enough, my only issue with Charm now is that it still has power points left. I just need to wait out some turns, so I bring Berserker back and start spamming useless stats boosting moves. It isn't too long though until Wigglytuff begins to struggle, and now I'm ready to deal with the Starmobile. Before that though, we have Dash Bun. It does have a super effective move in Crunch, but with all of my boosts it should be fine, especially since I have Spite to get rid of those power points very quickly. After that, there really isn't anything else I'm worried about, so I just spend the majority of turns baton passing around in order to preserve as much PP as possible. Honestly, it's kind of strange how much PP Baton Pass has. Was it really expected to be used 40 times in a battle? After a long relay of Pokemon, the Starmobile moves in, and like the others, I switch to a Pokemon that's holding a Black Sludge, hand it over, and sit back. None of the damaging attacks can cause me any grief in its current state, and Confuse Ray can't hit me from behind a substitute, so this is probably the second easiest Starmobile to deal with. As much as things like Toxic Orb and Flame Orb, along with Choice Band and Choice Specs, would have been really useful during this challenge, I'm glad that Game Freak at least gave us access to things similar before completing the whole game. No idea what I have done without access to Choice Scarf and Black Sludge. Nothing else to do except take on the final Team Starbase. I've actually lost my notes on the Grunts team outside, but I'm guessing by the fact that I trick a Choice Scarf immediately means Krogunk has nothing it can hit me with. This locks it into Nasty Plot, so I begin setting up for the second Pokemon. I'd probably go a bit overboard here with the excessive boosts, but I may as well make something of the turns I have to wait while Nasty Plot runs out of power points. That said, it should be clear by now what I'm doing, so let's skip ahead. Eventually, Krogunk knocks itself out, and Primeape follows it up. If I was this prepared for the previous Starmobile, a regular Pokemon should be no problem. And you know what? That wasn't some kind of misdirect. I passed the Black Sludge over with no issue and began the stall. Small bonus in this fight in particular, Primeape actually used Outrage, so eventually it ended up confusing itself. The confusion didn't really amount to much, but it was always nice to have that little bit of extra consistency on my side. The fighting base leader is an interesting one. It's almost a full team with what is essentially a boss fight at the end. This could have been a lot trickier than it was. Thankfully, I can abuse the opening Toxicroak a little bit. Before that though, I finally used Glamora in a Team Star battle. Toxicroak is the only Pokemon that could absorb the toxic spikes, but it would have to switch in to do that. Taking a look at its moveset, we see it can only damage me with Brick Break or Poison Jab. Since it's already used Brick Break quite a few times, I can switch back and forth between Drifloon and Berserker until only Poison Jab remains. With only a poison damaging move remaining, Berserker can get to work with Iron defences and Amnesia boosts. Drifloon may not be immune, but eventually I can bring it in quite safely knowing its poison resistance and massive defence boosts should keep it safe. One quick minimise and I return to Berserker to finish stalling out Toxicroak. I was a little paranoid that Toxicroak's superior speed to Drifloon may result in me getting caught off guard by a lucky crit or something, so one evasion boost was enough for the time being. Persimmon is the second Pokemon and immediately it hits hard with close combat. My maxed out EV speed stat though does mean I can just about outspeed and set up safely. Knowing I was pretty safe, I waited for the poison to finish the job. This was all well and good, but I knew there was a Lucario waiting in the wing. It would be immune to the poison damage and its access to Aura Sphere would mean it could get around the evasion boosts. My game plan assumed Lucario would be out next, so I was caught a little off guard when Annihilate comes in. I needed to adjust on the fly, and this wasn't helped when I was outsped and knocked out of my sub. I only had one safe solution I could resort to. Furret comes in and is holding a Choice Scarf, so I knew I could move first. It seemed almost certain that I was going to see another close combat, so I Terra Ghost and used Trick to pass the Choice Scarf over. Close combat only has a few power points, but I can use the few turns afforded to me to deal with the speed issues I've been having so far by using a few agilities. Thanks to the poison damage though, I only have to tank 2 struggles before Annihilate knocks itself out. Finally, Lucario does come in and I can't trick over the Choice Scarf like I'd originally planned. That's fine though, I have backup plans and more importantly, my increased speed means Drifloon can finally set up the other 2 minimizers. After this, I move back to spamming Spite to get rid of Lucario's remaining power points for Dark Pulse and Dragon Pulse. All that was left now was Aura Sphere, so I could switch over to my Poltergeist and trick over a Black Sludge. At this point, I could have just stalled the remaining power points, but this approach will mean me having to tank less damage. With only a fighting move remaining, my Ghost types can just hang about in preparation for the Starmobile. Similar to the majority of the other Starmobiles, I'm prepared to pass over a Black Sludge to wear it down. Looking at this Starmobile's moveset, its attacks are pretty well covered by my Rotom. High horsepower and combat torque will do nothing to me, and my electric typing means I resist Spin Out. This means realistically I can expect to see 2 attacks during this battle, Spin Out and Shift Gear. Shift Gear is a little scary since it boosts both attack and speed. Starmobiles already have quite a high speed stat, so it is plausible that it could exceed my agility boosts. I thought I'd need to see a healthy number of Spin Out since this reduces Starmobile's speed, but it always seemed to use it when I was using Protect. That said, almost halfway through the fight, I see that Starmobile can't raise its speed any higher when it used Shift Gear. On following turns, my Rotom still moves first, so that eased my concern. With this in mind, I now know that it should be simple to tank the damage until the final Starmobile goes down. All 5 star bases taken care of was pleasing, but that isn't the end of this story arc. Clive was the next opponent, and although there's no gimmicks in this fight, planning for his team proved quite tricky. In real time this took about 2 hours, a lot of which was PP stalling when I couldn't take any damage at all, so I'm going to cut out a lot here. If for whatever reason you want to see the full thing, I'll be uploading all the full battles on my VOD channel. That's enough preamble though. As you can see, the first matchup was Umbreon against Oranguru. Taking a look at its moveset, we can see that a dark Pokemon behind a substitute is pretty safe here. The only attack that can do damage is Foul Play, and its damage is based on my attack stat, so I made sure to keep it as low as possible to reduce incoming damage. I can make it even weaker by piling on 6 growls, making me basically untouchable for this part. With a lot of time to spare, I can start boosting myself with some Calm Minds. Long term, I'd be passing around a lot of boosts, but before I use Baton Pass the first time, I wanted to stall out the remaining foul plays. Knowing whatever Pokemon I bring in next will be safe, I decided to go with Hitmontop. I'm able to casually set up 6 bulk ups in order to max out my physical defense alongside my already maxed out special defense. At this point, I could have easily moved on to increasing my speed with agility, but at the time, I thought it'd be best to spread the work around a bit more, so I passed over to Mousehold. I used Tidy Up in an attempt to increase my speed, which of course does work, but I forget this move also gets rid of any substitutes. Normally, this would have been a terrible mistake, but Oranguru still has no damaging moves available. This means it's simple enough to reset my sub and now pass to Swordsbook. He has access to the more traditional agility, so I use that instead to max out my speed. With everything maxed out, nothing interesting happens for quite a few turns, so let's jump to Umbreon passing out for Farigiraf. With all the boosts, it doesn't have much trouble tanking the struggles. I wasn't sure what would come in next, but I knew there were priority moves lurking, so I wanted Armor Tail at the ready. Clive decides to go with Gyarados, which isn't a threat in terms of priority, so I immediately pass over to Hitmontop. The following few turns are spent switching between it and Umbreon. Neither Pokemon can take super effective damage from any of Gyarados' attacks. Furthermore, every time I switch Hitmontop in, the Intimidate weakens all incoming damage. As far as movesets go, Gyarados is probably the most problematic Pokemon in this fight. I'm okay investing more Pokemon into this battle, since the remaining Pokemon shouldn't be as bad to deal with. In theory, I could have brought a Flying Pokemon and a Water Absorb Pokemon to deal with Earthquake and Aqua Tail, but in this instance, it seemed more sensible to just deal with any and all damage. +6 in my defenses and -6 in Gyarados' attack mean it's really only Stone Edge with its high crit rate that possesses a threat. But even then, that has low PP and shaky accuracy. After that was taken care of, Abomasnow came in next, and that was the Pokemon I needed to prepare against priority for. Starting the battle, I was already behind a substitute, so it wasn't too bad starting the battle with Hitmontop, but it was important to pass over to Farigiraf immediately. Now with immunity to Ice Shard, I only had to deal with Blizzard and Woodhammer. This probably would have been fine anyway, but since I had the time to kill, I used Sunny Day. This got rid of the Hail Abomasnow setup. Wait, is it Hail anymore or is it Snow? Anyway, with whatever it is gone, Blizzard's accuracy would drop significantly. All that was left now was to try and nerf Woodhammer by spamming Growl. This was probably the right idea in order to make sure that my subs wouldn't break as easily. That said, if I'd left its attack stat unchanged, I think the recoil damage from Woodhammer would have added up more. This may have meant I could have ended the fight earlier. Probably best though just to nerf it and wait a bit longer. Even with Growl's 40 PP, my moveset didn't have enough power points to outlast Abomasnow's without using Baton Pass, so towards the end I did have to start swapping between Farigiraf and Umbreon. At this point though, both Woodhammer and Blizzard were out of PP, so it was safe to do so since every other Ice Shard would be negated. Okay, so those last couple of Pokemon were kind of tedious to deal with, but for a while now I'd be able to switch off my brain. Amoonguss is in next, and taking a look at its moveset, its 2 damaging attacks have no effect on my Sap Sipper Swordsbook, and it wouldn't be able to status me from behind a sub. With that in mind, I'm just going to skip the 10 minutes of me clicking random moves, and we can just watch Amoonguss struggle. The free wins continue as Polteageist comes in next. Once again, its only attacking move that could threaten me was Shadow Ball. I have 2 Pokemon on my team that are normal type, so it's even easier to stall out. Once again, I'll just jump ahead to the final couple of turns. After an already long battle, it was finally time to take on the last Pokemon. Because of my choice of starter, Skeledirge was the final Pokemon. The beauty of facing this Pokemon as opposed to the other 2 starters is that its moveset has a couple of sound based attacks. To deal with this, my last Pokemon is Komodo, who has access to the soundproof ability. With 2 attacks immediately dealt with, I could start focusing on the other 2. Another great thing about Komodo is that it has access to the move Noble Roar, lowering both of Skeledirge's attacks. The special attack stat drop would be great short term for me dealing with Shadow Ball and Earth Power, and the attack stat drop would pay off when it came to struggle. Thankfully, unlike Abomasnow, the moveset here used attacks that have lower power points. This was crucial since although Komodo was a good counter, it didn't have access to Baton Pass, so it would need to finish this fight off on its own. Without access to Torch Song, Skeledirge couldn't boost its special attack, which meant its attacks would only get weaker, especially after it ran out of Shadow Ball power points, so it could only resort to non-stab attacks. Inevitably, it had to switch back to the sound-based attacks, and at that point, I knew the fight was as good as over. That was a pretty ridiculously slow fight, but honestly, it felt like each Pokemon could methodically be dealt with, other than just the insane stat passing. Just one more fight in this story arc, and it was against Penny. Thankfully, it would be easier to shortcut this fight, but it has the potential to get a bit more dicey. The first turn was a bit of a gamble, because Umbreon could have easily used Quick Attack against my Dugtrio. That said, because it was literally turn 1, I was willing to take that chance, since it would be quick enough to reset. I was surprised that after using Memento, the Glamora sub could withstand a super effective Psychic. I know Umbreon isn't exactly known for its offensive stats, and it wasn't a big deal since I could just waste turns using Rock Polish. Penny's whole team is made up of evolutions, meaning there was no flying, steel or poison types to dodge the toxic spikes that I would set up. Since any attack could knock out my 1 HP Glamora, I knew there was a good chance I'd see a quick attack. So, after abusing Endure once, I switched out to Serena, whose Queenly Majesty prevented any priority. I'd maxed out Serena's special defense, so along with the Memento nerf, there shouldn't be too much that can threaten me here. Building on that, she also has access to Light Screen, meaning I have plenty of time to heal up after each substitute with leftovers. Knowing I'm safe in the short term, I had time to use Play Nice, lowering Umbreon's attack for when it would need to struggle. As for the PP stalling, I had access to Splash. Honestly, I'm a little surprised at how many evolution lines have access to that move, but it does always amuse me at how useful it's been during this challenge. With Psychic and Dark Pulse dealt with, there was a lot of Quick Attack and Baby Doll Eye power points to wait out, so I thought there'd be nothing to do here. It then occurred to me though that since Quick Attack was the only damaging move left, I should actually switch to Oricorio and get to work setting up. Of course, this is the Go Sensu style as opposed to the other versions I'd used in previous fights. Since most of the evolutions would have special attacks as their main attack, setting up 6 Quiver Dance would put me in a really good position for the rest of the battle. I still had plenty of time though, so why not bring in an evolution of my own? Vaporeon lets me complete my defense boosting by throwing in a few Acid Armors. After a long time, Umbreon finally goes down. The other 5 Pokemon combined would actually be quicker than this single fight thanks to the Toxic Spikes. Vaporeon is the second evolution to come in, and that's the second reason why I decided to go with a Vaporeon of my own. I'm able to absorb any water attack, and initially resisted the Aurora Beam. I think I got mixed up here though, thinking I had Terra Ghost to ignore quick attacks, but looks like this one was Terra Normal, so that was unfortunate. This made Quick Attack a bit of a threatening prospect, but I was surprised that it was used so much. Surely a now neutral Aurora Beam would have been a better attack choice, coming off Vaporeon's superior special attack. Stalling out the poison doesn't cause too many problems, but I was a bit more concerned now about facing 4 more Pokemon with priority. Flareon came in next, and I did actually have a way to deal with this one. I pass over to my Ninetales on the first turn. This is essentially a free switch since Flare Blitz is absorbed by Flash Fire. Flareon's only other non-priority attack is also a fire type, so I knew it would have to resort to Quick Attack. To that end, I just switched between Protect and Substitute for the remaining turns. Obviously Protect would shrug off anything, but by spacing it out with substitutes, I would at least be confident that if it was broken, I'd immediately be replacing it. Jolteon was the 4th Pokemon, and it pretty quickly lands a critical hit Thunder, breaking my sub and leaving me exposed. I had a choice at that point. Do I switch to Oricorio anticipating the Quick Attack, or just set the substitute back up? I assumed, due to its much more powerful Thunder, that Jolteon would just keep spamming that move. That was the case for the most part, but there was one turn where it randomly used Quick Attack. I really didn't have a good read on what attacks would be used in this battle. I was depending a lot on luck. Seeing Leafeon was a breath of fresh air. Oricorio was a good counter, since it would resist X-Scissor and Leaf Blade, and of course take no damage at all from Quick Attack. That said, I did switch out Oricorio at one point to Ninetales, only to immediately switch back. There was some weird decision making in this battle. I don't know, maybe I was tired when I recorded this part. Sylveon came in last, and it did have access to 2 pretty hard hitting attacks in Moonblast and Shadow Ball. Fortunately for me though, they weren't strong enough to break through my substitute in one hit. This meant my leftovers recovery would be enough for me to hold on comfortably while the poison picked up the last KO. And that was it for Starfall Street. But you know what? That wasn't it for the base game. There was one last part I needed to deal with. The Area Zero story isn't exactly heavy on trainer battles, but once in the facility, I did have to battle AI Sada. All of a sudden, I was very happy to be playing Scarlet version. Firstly, her lead Pokemon was a physical attacker. This meant I could get on with my usual shenanigans, using Memento with 2 Dugtrio, then bringing in Glamora. You'll notice here that I Terra Rock. The only purpose for this was to remove my Psychic weakness. I was happy to see any other move in Slitherwing's arsenal, but if it were to use Zen Headbutt on the turn I used Endure and it missed, my whole strategy would fall apart. I was expecting to see nothing but Low Sweep now that I was weak against a fighting type attack, but Slitherwing appeared to just be using attacks randomly. Thankfully, on the turn that mattered, I was able to trigger Toxic Debris, and could now finish nerfing Slitherwing with a 3rd Memento. That was the battle pretty much won already. The Paradox Pokemon she uses are strong, but they were all just using regular hard-hitting moves. No sound types, no priority, no multi-hit. I could just take my time at the start, maxing out my defenses, speed and evasion. Even better, by bringing Masquerain with me, I didn't have to waste time PP stalling the first Pokemon. Once I knew I was safe, I could just whirlwind it out and let the poison deal with it later. In fact, none of the Paradox Pokemon here could resist the poison, so there wouldn't be as much waiting around as usual. While I let that battle play out, I should probably mention the battle that follows. As a reminder to anyone who hasn't played in a while, or to those of you who haven't played at all, there is a Koraidon mirror match after this fight. In that battle, there is no way to influence your Pokemon's level, stats or moveset, and with what's given by default, I'm fairly certain it would be impossible to win under the conditions set for this challenge. That said, I would be hesitant to even refer to that battle as a trainer battle, since it feels more like a raid battle. Then again, if you do count it as a proper trainer battle, then you can consider this challenge a failure. Other than that though, the main story is complete along with the first DLC. If you've gotten this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'm guessing some of you may naturally be asking the question, what about the second DLC? Well, the trainers there are built differently, but keep an eye out next week for the final video in this trilogy, where I take on the Blueberry Academy. Wish me luck!